Where's that voice coming from?
Good morning.
Good morning, Ryder. It's me, God, the one you totally believe in.
Oh, hey, buddy. What's up?
Yeah.
I don't know why you said I totally believe in you. Of course I do. You're talking to me right now.
Well, you know, when Morgan Freeman did that bad impression of me in that movie, I started to wonder what people really thought. And you were on that list. Ho, ho, ho. Oh, crap. Wrong time of year.
Is that God? Ho, ho, ho.
I'm a man of many faces, Ryder.
What's the beard?
I'm actually a black man, too. Did you know that?
Oh, wait. Which is this God or Morgan Freeman speaking now?
This is Reed Garcia speaking. Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
Hey. How's life in the DFW Metroplex?
You know, it's grand, actually. Today is a nice balmy, I think it was like 35 or something this morning. So nice.
Oh.
What about you? What are you in? Are you in one of those boxes again? Are you in jail?
I am. Yeah. It's a gel of my own making.
Nice.
It's called My Life. Yeah. No, I'm in some sort of Airbnb, and yeah, I'm gonna just pick up my camera, and
Ooh.
so I've got window blinds and blank walls.
I was gonna say it looks like it's very well decorated.
It's one of those, and this is the first time I've encountered this one of these like professional Airbnbs. So it's run by a third party system, and you have to download their app in order to access the space. And yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. You know, for it to be a professional one, you'd expect maybe a hint of decor, but you make the space what you will, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's at least it's kind of offensive in its non-offensiveness. That's what I was thinking last night. It's so sort of bland and clean that it's like you just I don't know. You're just a jerk if you complain.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people who aim to be exactly that. I think I can picture at least one person in my head who's like, "Oh yeah, that's them."
So blandly not offensive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you ever see Arrested Development had a character that her name was Anne? The dad kept calling her bland.
No, I didn't. I never saw that, and once I watched Ozark, or I was like, "Oh, maybe I should go watch some of." That's the same guy, right?
Yeah, same guy. I think yeah, if you're gonna do it, only do the first 3 seasons and then drop it.
I feel like that's kind of a good rule of thumb for most series. Like in my mind, like it's a lot to be a good TV show's period. It's much less to be a good TV show for multiple seasons. Then to go past like the 3 mark, that's where I feel like most series is like, okay, you're really holding on. And then you have things like Game of Thrones, like hold on for like 4 or 5 and then throw it away in like the number 6 or 7 whenever they went downhill.
Yeah, it's also it's about the time I think their name gets out. I start thinking that the branding really starts or whatever, the word of mouth really starts spreading around season 3 or something. And then it's almost like they go, "Hey, we finally got a budget. Now let's get some other new writers in here." And then I don't know. I feel like when money gets involved, it sort of kills the spirit of some of these things.
Oh, I don't doubt it at all. And especially being in the art world, I'm sure you've seen that at least once before.
I will pretend I have, even if
Yeah, I
it's
was gonna
not.
say, let me
Yeah.
hold on. Let me reel that back. Art world, money getting involved. Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, not personally. I've seen it happen to other people.
I've seen it in story. I've seen it in movies.
Yeah, right.
I've seen high budget movies about it. Well, hey, good morning, Ryder. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So yesterday we took off. We had a couple of things end up changing and causing us to take off the day. But did you have a good weekend?
I had a pretty good weekend. Yeah, it was busy. Felt like I got a lot accomplished, and for me that's always nice. And then yeah, hit the road and got down here. So I'm in the Houston area today, working on a
Oh,
different project. Oh, yeah, and of course it's instantly 10 or 15 degrees warmer here and more humid. And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of balmy.
yeah.
It's just a different environment. But yeah, everything else is pretty good. How about your weekend? Did you do anything?
Yeah. So, our weekend was good. We had a good amount of hanging out, relaxing. I finally cracked open a new board game that I've had for about a month and a half now. It's called The Lost Ruins of Arnak. Dun dun dun.
Ooh.
And it's kind of got like a adventure explorer vibe, and you're going and looking for this lost temple. I might have said Lost Ruins, but I meant Lost Temple.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so it's a board game that I got, and Danielle and I started playing it, and now it's on the table for us to pick back up. And then also, got set up for streaming. Video games.
Ooh.
Yeah,
So,
after the
and this is Rocket League, is that right?
that will probably be one of the main things. I don't know if I've mentioned to you before or not, but in addition to helpful for Rocket or helpful for life, I plan on doing some other
For
helpful
Rocket,
things
I
like
like
helpful
it.
for Rocket League, potentially
Yeah.
helpful for disc golf, and then a couple of other things where I'm trying to find areas where it's like, hey, here's a thing that I'm doing anyways. And I've done it for a while to enough to learn what's going on, and I can tap into some experts and teach some things that are my hobbies as well. So board games will probably end up making it in there as well. But yeah, so I got the computer all set up in my living room, so I can now stream from my couch, and I can even do like draw on the play and do instant replay analysis and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I like the idea of you being the instant replay, the sort of John Madden of Rocket League.
Oh yeah, and don't worry, we're gonna have at least one of these shows where I'll be doing some instant replays of of our episode. I feel like that could be a fun idea. But yeah, it was interesting getting the tech set up. Have a PC running the game that's going to a Mac, which is streaming, and then I have an iPad with an Apple Pencil that's being used as a digitizer, if that means anything to you, as a tablet on the PC, so I can draw on the PC screen.
Ah,
And then I wanted to get the audio to where I could hear the game noise in my Spotify music, but my Spotify music doesn't go on the stream, so I don't get stricken for copyright. So yeah, getting it all set up just right took a lot longer than you might think.
no, I mean it sounds very complicated. It's fascinating that I consider myself fairly tech savvy, but sometimes just getting a microphone to work is
Yeah,
like takes 37 clicks.
yeah,
You're
I
like,
feel
what
that
in the
for sure.
world? So
Well, on a quick recap, for Friday, episode 68, we had an exciting time with David Orozco of Orozco Nutrition. And he came and we talked a little bit about changing your mindset and relationship with food. And we talked about how a lot of people get focused, especially in America, on the diet. They get focused on losing weight. They get focused on thinness. They have a little bit of fat phobia. So we talked a little bit about what that fat phobia is. Why do we even prize thinness, as a thing of beauty? He talked a little bit about that, and we also referenced his podcast, One Small Bite, where he actually had an episode all on fat phobia. And it was a great discussion with David. Do you have anything that you remember or popped off of your head? Or, of course, if you're drawing blanks, that's fine too.
no, no. And there were some things I really enjoyed about the way he talked about just sort of paying attention to your own sort of individual sensibilities and finding something that worked for you. And there seemed to be sort of a very human element to this idea. It's not like a one size fits all kind of prescription. And that's one of the things I'm increasingly interested in, is this kind of attentiveness to individuals and sort of taking them where they are and working with them to find something that works for them, instead of this sort of more prescriptive sort of systems or sense that we tend to push onto people. It's like, hey, this is science and this should work. Now do it.
Right.
Because apparently it's not working, at least
Yeah.
not for everybody.
No, I agree, and I mentioned I think on the show Friday, and I'll mention it again. Ever since I came across David and the way he's teaching and the anti-diet and this whole concept and idea of like, hey, the way we've been looking at food is not only just wrong, but it's unhealthy, and it leads to people developing a lot of bad habits and having a very, very negative self-image about themselves and the way they talk about other people. It ripples into so many different areas of life. And so I'm really excited to announce that we'll be working with David going forward as of in the next few weeks. Some of the things that he's working with us on is we're revamping the nutrition information within Kickstart Your Kitchen, making sure that we get our course, our online course, who haven't heard of it. For those who have not heard of it, kickstartyourkitchen.com. And we're working with him to beef up our nutrition information, and I don't think there's necessarily anything factually wrong. I'll be interested to see what he finds out, but certainly some changes with the word choices and the language that we can make change to line up a little bit more with the values of making sure people are treated like humans, and learning what they need to know so they can have a solid relationship with their food. And additionally, in late February, maybe early March, sometime in that time frame, we're going to be launching a cohort class with David, where we talk about changing a relationship with your food. So keep your ears peeled and eyes peeled for more of that. One thing I didn't mention on Friday, but I want to make sure to mention today, was the tagline he has at the end of his podcast, which is called One Small Bite, which is called One Small Bite because it's very much the same approach as we've talked about in the show many times, which is taking one small step at a time instead of trying to do the whole thing or get this grand goal or, do that big thing. It's focusing on one small step at a time, or in his case, one small bite at a time. And the tagline from his podcast is, chop that diet mentality, fuel your body, and nourish your soul. And I just really like that as like, hey, food is nourishment. It's got your body in there, your soul. It's got mentality talking about your head. It's like, all right, you've got someone who's teaching about food and nutrition, yes, but clearly it's got body, mind, and soul within the tagline. It's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into our intro. Helpful for life. Welcome to What the Hell is Water. I'm Reed Garcia, founder and CEO.
This is writer Richards, random guy that Reed lets hang out on the show sometime. I don't know, sort of sidetrack his conversations. It's mostly my job here.
Yeah, and he does a great job at it, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, hey, I wanted to tell you about something.
I was waiting on it. So speaking of telling me about something, writer, it's episode 69.
Oh man.
And
What are you gonna do?
I gotta ask you a question. Throughout your life, however, I don't know, 80, 70 years of life that you've had now, what chunk of that life did you hear the number 69 and not have, if not an internal giggle, at least like oh yeah, that number?
Oh, I would have to say all 78 of my years I have giggled
Yeah.
as soon as I understood that term, which I don't think I understood it until, let's say, what, 12 years old or something. Was kind of a late bloomer and all that stuff. I don't
Was
know.
that when your mom gave you the birds and the bees talk and said, "Son, let me show you something"?
No, God, no. My mom would never say that. um, yeah, I think I ended up getting this the old-fashioned way, which was boys on the playground being
Nice.
dirty.
Nice.
So,
I
yeah,
like
that's
it.
how I found out about this, and
I was
yeah.
on the edge of my seat when you said the old-fashioned way. I was like,
The
who
old
knows? Who
Yeah,
knows?"
right, right. I actually made out with a bee, and it hurts.
Well, yeah, birds and bees, nice. So for today, I couldn't have us have episode 69 and not talk at least some about it. And so since you're aware, the episode title for today was something along the lines of blowjobs, smelly vaginas, and other things we've changed our position on. So the I think I might have softened it to not have vagina in the title,
Yeah,
but we'll
really, really going for those salacious titles there.
yeah, we'll
Nice.
see. Well, we'll see. But yeah, so for today, I wanted to talk a little bit about oral sex itself, because I wanted to make sure to talk about that. And as a helpful for life, sex is one of the topics we cover, so I definitely want to talk about the sex part itself. But then I also wanted to talk a little bit about us changing positions. And yes, that's a little play on sex positions, but it's also, I mean, the reason 69 represents oral sex is because a 6 and a 9 are the same, just upside down and facing each other. And so it enables two humans to have oral sex together at the same time, pleasuring each other. So Ryder and I are going to pleasure each other on air here, oratorily rather. Um,
Oh,
yeah, that was
I
a
was,
stretch.
I was getting excited? No,
Yeah.
confused. Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit about the sex, but then also about some things maybe you've changed your position on over the years. So that'll be in the second part of the show, and depending on how time goes, we may pull in Danielle for another tarot reading, or maybe not. So let's go ahead and start off with the actual oral sex part. When it comes to oral sex, Ryder, what do you think of?
um, yeah, I think of either going down on a girl or getting a blowjob, of course. The funny thing about the whole 69 deal is I was just sitting there thinking about it, and it's like, I don't often end up in that position anymore. But there was a
Old
period of
bones.
time. Yeah, I don't like. I'm just sitting there going like, oh, I don't know. Like it's not part of the repertoire that we
Yeah.
go through now. And so I'm kind of like, like yeah, I should throw that back in there because it's fun.
Yeah. Well, don't throw your back because you're getting old. We got to be
Yeah,
careful on that one.
I know, very
Uh,
gently.
But there is something about, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on all the positions out there in the world, but not all of them have one person completely inverted. So there is kind of a lot of change that needs to happen from the natural laying on the couch, laying on the bed position. One of you has to turn 180 degrees. So that makes sense why it's not like the first thing that happens. But yeah, when I think of oral sex, the first thing I think of is how a lot of people don't like to do it, or how they
Oh,
claim they don't like to do it. And like a lot of things on this show, I think oral sex is something that people should push through that initial discomfort, and it's the first time they're doing anything, and they don't really know what they're doing. They don't know how they're doing it. They don't know if the person likes it. As I alluded to in the title, in the case of the going down on a female, some people say things about smell or taste or things like that. In the case I'm going down on a guy, there's a potential choking, right, or
well,
gagging.
and there's probably also smell and taste.
Yes.
It's like I don't know. It's those bits down there are it's going to sort of collect scents. It just like an armpit or anything else. There's extra flesh down there, and there's little crevices or whatever can thrive, and so you're going to encounter that, and it's just sort of it is funny to sort of think that somebody is about to swap bodily fluids in all these other ways, but this one is the
Right.
one way that they won't do it. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And so I think some of it's just recognizing exactly what it is, and what the harms or downsides of it are or whatnot. And of course, we can't talk about sex without talking about sexually transmitted diseases or sexually transmitted infections, STIs, STDs. And if you are doing oral sex with, especially with a partner who you're not familiar with all their history and how promiscuous they may be or not, that is something to be aware of. And again, I'm not an expert on this, and I am not giving any kind of medical advice, but I do believe it's possible to give some sorts of things both from the mouth to the genitals and from the genitals to the mouth, herpes and things like that. So be aware of that as one little silver, not silver lining, but warning, word of caution, I guess. Um, but yeah, I remember back in high school is when started to hear more about it and it more talked about. And I actually remember certain people at my high school being talked about, like, oh, they have a smelly, hoo ha or whatnot. And it's like, well, again, it's kind of unfortunate because sure, there may be some amount of things you can do to help control your body, but at the end of the day, your body's going to smell in some ways like it does just because that's how your body is, right? So one thing I was going to mention when it comes to especially the guys or the gals having sense, if you're out on a date and you just went and did some date thing like dancing or clubbing or you're getting all sweaty or whatnot, like you can always grab one of those adult type of wipes. I don't know if you've seen those before, where it's like you have like a baby wipe, but then they have
Mm.
these adult wipes, if you will, and some of them are meant like they're bigger. They're like a big sheet of paper towel or something, except they're kind of moist and they're basically like a larger baby wipe. And so you can use those. For example, if you're in the wilderness and you want to like a
Mm.
shower, like you could use that. Also, if you're on a date and you need a quick wipe down, there's another way to kind of get rid of some of all that gunk and crevices and smells that you were so
You
lovingly
know
describing
what's
for us.
What's so interesting to me is that I don't know. I would assume if you're out on a date and everything's rocking along and you're having fun, and there is something that might seem sort of perverse about this, but the idea that the sweatiness and everything else, like if you're dancing with somebody and y'all are really getting after it, and then you get back home and you get after it, it all seems to be part of the same thing. And the
Yeah,
idea that you'd have to stop and clean up and do all this other stuff is there's some sort of like self-consciousness trigger that is happening there that actually it seems maybe it's really polite to do for your partner or whatever, but at the same time it's kind of like, I don't know, I would like it if the passion just took over.
no,
I would
I
like it if you could
agree.
just work past that.
I agree, but also and and also that leads me to one of the things that I've wanted to ask our viewer at home, which is, hey, has anyone ever told you like, hey, this smells or this is bad or whatnot? And that's not always a good measuring stick, right? Because one, some people will never tell you, and things go on forever, but without you knowing. But also, lost my train of thought on that one. But the main point was uh, having conversations around it. This
Mm.
sex is generally kind of a taboo topic, especially in regular everyday conversation. Especially when there's certain people around, you're like, oh, I don't want to talk about sex around my family or whatnot, as if it's some like dirty, nasty things that
Yeah,
nobody
as
should
if they
talk
don't
about.
know this is happening.
Right? It's like, oh wait,
Yeah.
how'd you get those kids? I don't know.
um,
One benefit is
Immaculate
just
conception.
no kids. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that reminds me of an article Danielle sent me one time where I can't remember the exact title, but it was something like how I asked one guy, is a female who wrote the article, and she's like, I asked one guy about oral sex, and it changed my oral sex life forever, because she had that conversation with one of her partners and was like, hey, like, actually, I think it was, why don't you go down on me? And he started to talk about all of the reasons why. He's like, well, I think about this, or I'm scared about that, or I had this experience where I messed this up, or somebody in the past told me that. And she was like, oh, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was basically the effect of, oh, I don't care about any of that, so let's try it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, thanks, I'm glad you've asked me. I've now been in this state for 15 years. And similarly, I feel like one of the kind of related things with marriages a lot of times happen is, oh, well, once you get married, you never get a blowjob again or whatever. And obviously, there's a whole spectrum on how true that is, but certainly easy for certain things like that, especially when they require 180 degrees of turning around, that they don't necessarily get shaken out of the repertoire.
Yeah, it is kind of funny to think about that. It goes back to this thing again where, the idea that, I don't know, the guys don't like going down on girls, and that girls don't necessarily, a lot of girls don't like going down on guys. And you hear all these stereotypes and rumors about this kind of stuff. And I wonder if that just sort of implants some sort of idea, that okay, we're now that we're at this stage, I no longer have to do these things, but
Mhm.
previously I had to do these things, and the only way to get a partner is to do these things, and then as soon as we get married, I get to go back to being completely selfish. I mean, that's sort of the, it seems like the underlying premise behind that. And I think one of the things about oral sex is it is something that can be very giving. If you're not in a 69, then you can just be pleasuring your partner or vice versa. And there's something about being able to just receive pleasure without also having to be giving it simultaneously. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one reaction or
Right.
exchange. And I think that's one of the things that's, kind of nice about oral in general, is that if you're not doing something like a 69, then there is just one partner being concentrated on, and
Yeah.
that can be exciting, and
And
it can also sort of show concern, and it can show care and passion and a lot of other things like that, that if it always has to be mutually beneficial, I think you kind of miss out on some really exciting intimate moments.
yeah, I really appreciate you pointing that out because I agree wholeheartedly. I feel like that's also a trap that a lot of people fall into in their sex lives is they get into that same routine, right? And it's like, okay, well, now we're gonna have sex, and then I'm gonna make sure you orgasm, I'm gonna orgasm, and we're gonna have a great time, and then sometimes it's like, oh well, oh, I came early or I didn't you it didn't finish you off or whatever, and it's as if those are bad things. And yes, I will say that if you're not achieving orgasm ever or somewhat regularly, like there are things you can figure out and some exploration you can do to help figure out how that can happen more often, if that's something you want, especially if it's something you never experienced before. But it's also okay to have a sexual experience without going to completion, and that's perfectly fine too, because sex is about a lot of things, and one of it is connection with the person you're with. Some of it's about the all of the pheromones going on, all the hormones, and getting all the those caveman brain type of things on, where it's like, hey, this is happening, we're having a good time. Maybe I feel wanted, maybe I feel good about myself. All those types of things are some of the things that come into your head as you're performing these sexual acts. But also, as a lot of people may be aware, negative thoughts tend to creep into head, like, oh, I'm self-conscious about my body or how someone's looking at me, or oh, maybe my stuff looks weird down there, it doesn't look like I see on the pornos or in the movies. And oh, maybe it even is my guy straight up told me like his type is he's an ass guy and I'm a boobs girl or whatever, or oh, he's
Yeah.
into a bunch of Asian anime and I'm a white blonde girl, whatever it may be. But a lot of these kind
Yeah.
of self-conscious type of things can start to ruminate in there.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what is happening there. I was talking with somebody not too long ago about fantasy though, and there's this kind of thing that when we start talking about when people sort of decide that this is their preference, like I'm an anime guy or I'm a butt guy, or whatever, and then they're with somebody else and they keep on saying I'm an anime guy or I'm a butt guy, then it's like, well, there's something about the fantasy thing of something like anime that is interesting, because of course I don't think they want their maybe they do, but I think it would be difficult to ever think that anybody was going to measure up to an anime character, and yet there is this kind of pressure there to conform, and that kind of conformity is interesting. There's one thing about revealing your fantasy and the other thing about trying to bring it into the real world, and I'm kind of curious about how all that works out. If guys quite literally think that they're going to at some point have an anime princess, or whatever, and so the partner being upset about those things, it's got to be difficult. But at the same point, the honest conversation and staying in the realm of fantasy can be fine. It's just, once again, like you're talking about these conversations instead of taking it literally. Like if somebody's like, well, I'm a butt guy, but however, the person is dating you, and so whatever that person is saying, they're with you right now, so apparently something is working, they're attracted
Yeah.
to you in some way. So there's this other side of it where people say things a lot of times without really thinking about how it's going to affect their partner. At the same time, if you call them out on everything, then they probably won't share with you anymore. So
Yeah, there's a balance.
finding some way to navigate that's going to be tricky, but that's relationship stuff. That's not necessarily which is sex stuff, which is kind of the interesting side of it, is one of the things I think you and I have talked about before or touched on briefly is the idea that sex has to always be there and be amazing. It's such a mile marker by which people gauge their relationships. And I wonder sometimes if that's just media driven or if that's real. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have to ask Eric Wooten, one of our relationship experts, someday about that, because I am curious his opinions on that. But if I were to go off the cuff here and what I think sex should be, I think it should ebb and flow like most things, kind of naturally. And I think there are going to be times where you're killing it and you're on top of it. And the thing about sex is, um, you know, there's so much that it takes to get to the right spot with sex, especially for some people, right? Like, so many things need to be lined up, and if any one of them is off, it can be hard to have that sexual drive, especially towards a certain person, right? And so that's a thing with marriages, relationships, whatever. A lot of times, sex can be an indicator. It's like, oh, well, we haven't had sex in 6 months or a year or something like that. Okay, well, maybe something's going on that isn't actually sex related, and that just happens to be the symptom of this. Like maybe your communication's not going well, maybe there's some harbored ill feelings that haven't been talked out, things like that, where it's like, well, I can like hardly look at you without getting mad. How do you expect me to get sexually aroused, right? And so those are just some examples of things that can happen. But I can't help but notice as we're talking here, Ryder, the thing we keep circling around is communication, and it seems like that seems to be one of the biggest things. Is hey, get it out there, start having conversations about it, because realistically speaking, like when's the last time someone I'm asking you, the viewer, when's the last time you've had a conversation with your partner about sex? um, you know Danielle and I are
Wednesday. Oh
Wednesday.
no,
Oh,
sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
Danielle, me, and Ryder on
Hump
Wednesday actually had
day.
this conversation. Hump day. Thank you. Oh, appreciate it. I didn't take the step myself on that. But yeah, Danielle and I talk about it. I'd say more than the average person, but even us sometimes it'll be like, oh, it'll go weeks without talking about it. And I know some people at home might be like, well, weeks. I mean, I haven't talked in months or years or maybe even ever about it.
Yeah, the talking. I would have to say that raised the way I was raised, very Christian, where premarital sex was you're going to hell. Once that's implanted in your head, then even if you do start having sex, it's still under this kind of taboo umbrella where you're not really supposed to be having it. So therefore, to talk about it is to sort of just like engage in the guilt, so to speak,
Right.
or the sin itself. It's to further that kind of principle. And so the idea that you wouldn't talk about it is very common in the areas where I grew up. And so this idea that you do have to talk about it is, it's fairly new to me. It's something that I've been learning, and my wife has been a tremendous help in all that and everything else. But you have to have a partner who's understanding and open to these topics, and not everyone is. And some people just want to shut the conversation down. And there's something interesting about having sex one time in the dark, and not enjoying it. It's all these kind of things that those jokes come from a very real place. And getting to the spot where you can have that conversation. Um, yeah, I think we'll need to talk to Eric about that as well. Like, how do you start broaching those topics, especially if one partner is really timid about talking about it? And, you're talking to about relationship stuff again, like timing and how that can kind of get played out or how things can get pushed down and you can just let the rest of your life go on. But my therapist at one point said something about there can be no intimacy without conflict. And I've been thinking about that a lot, like the idea that you have to be open and there has to be difference between two people in order for the intimacy to evolve. And that requires talking. And if you shut up and shut down, then there won't be any intimacy because there is no conflict either.
Yeah. It's an interesting statement. There cannot be intimacy without conflict. I'm gonna let that one noodle a little bit. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
I'm
don't.
not sure if I completely agree, but I see the point. So that is interesting to think about. But yeah, the main thing I would say for the viewers at home is it might feel a little weird. It might feel a little awkward. I mean, right now, we're on a live show, and if I say the word penis, oh, everyone starts to feel a little weird, myself included. I have alarms going off like, wait, are you supposed to say that word? And it's like, oh, penis, and then vagina, and then you're like, oh my gosh. And then what's going on? And then you get some spam chats too about online strips without clothing.
Oh, are you getting those? Oh,
Yes,
nice. Hey,
yes,
wow. Look,
they
and they're so repetitive.
they are. They are. So I get to deal with that person. Now they've been blocked. Um, but yeah, I think part of it is pushing through that initial discomfort, and I this may sound silly, but maybe the first step for some of you is going in a closet or the bathroom and talk and turn the fan on so no one can hear you, and talk to yourself and say the word penis, sex, vagina, blowjob out loud, orgasm. Like, maybe you've never really said those words out loud. And that's
Mm.
okay. Kind of as writers talking about, based on how you grew up, or the people you're around, or how prim and proper people are, or maybe just what you think is okay to talk about and not. You just haven't really said these words very much or talked about them, and so naturally you're going to be a little shy about it or not want to, say those things. But after all, most of these things are your body, or your partner's body, and it's something that you're around all the time. So being able to talk about it, I think, is a good step to work on. Um, and I think a good conversation, especially if you have a partner that you're working with, is to just ask them, like, hey, I'd like for us to try and do better at sex. Are you open to that? And and just start with that and see where it goes. And then if they say yes, then you say, okay, well, first let's talk about, like, I don't think we've ever talked about, like, what do you like and what do
Yeah.
you not
And if your
like?
partner says, "No, I don't want to do better at sex," I
Red
like,
flag, maybe. I don't
what?
know.
Like, who honestly says that? Like, that's
Yeah.
really wild.
I mean, I guess the the main people I could see where that'd be a nice valid response is, one, like, you're, oh, I'm already amazing at sex. I'm doing other
I
things,
got
right?
this.
No
Yeah.
worries.
Uh,
But yeah, I think it's worth having that conversation about, and seeing where it goes, right? And if you do it in that welcoming way, and make sure you're not attacking, right? I feel like that's one thing that happens a lot of time, especially stereotypically, with the man does something that makes the woman mad, so they stop having sex, and then the guy comes to her and is like, "Why don't we ever have sex anymore?" Gaga, and it's like, well, first of all, it probably has a lot to do with you, dude. Let's be real. Uh,
well, and there's also the withholding of sex as a weapon,
yeah,
because it'll piss off the partner. That happens on both sides.
for sure. And that's a problem with it too, right? It's like, all right, let's not do that with sex, because, oh, by the way, are we talking about all those feelings and chemicals and things like that? Those are all very valuable for everyone, and there's a couple of things that I think if people had more of would lead to, like, a better world, more chill, relaxed, agreeable world. Sex is up there, and weed's probably up there too. Like, if you want to have world peace, you want to have stimulate trade and happiness and all these things, like, get some people high and let them have some sex, and they'll be feeling good.
Yeah, yeah. There's something the therapist I was talking about previously has also mentioned that, like, partners need to, like, based on some studies, like, you need to be, like, intimate and touching at least once every 10 days or something. There's some sort of rule that couples just end up being closer to each other if you're doing these things on kind of a schedule, and that's the an interesting spot to get into if your relationship is stagnant or something, or you keep on avoiding these things. And what does it look like to sort of make sure that the situation happens so that you're both getting your needs met physically, not just because it is interesting if you think that the body actually helps us control our emotions. And if you're having trouble in your head, what if some of that's coming through your body? Because I can guarantee you that, like, after we have sex, then a lot of other things shift, right? Like,
Hmm.
I can be mad about the laundry or the dishes or something dumb, and then we have sex, and all of a sudden I'm not mad about anything anymore. Like, so what was that anger actually coming from? It was probably coming from some sort of discomfort I was feeling because my body craved something. And then it might be intimacy, it might be the physicality of sex, or just release, whatever it is. But it's interesting to think about it in those ways.
Yeah. And here is a free idea for all condom oral, or not oral, but condom companies, sex toy companies, lube companies. Make this commercial, and give me a percentage once you make it. Do a riff on the Snickers commercial. You're not you when you're hungry. You're not you when you're horny. Grab a Trojan or a Durex or whatever, one of these brands, and I feel like they could have a little thing with that. And also want to point out, oral sex is a great way for, hey, maybe if like I'm not really feeling it and I'm not getting into it and my body isn't gonna get aroused, oral sex could be a great place for you to still engage with some sexual have a sexual encounter without you having to be aroused, right? And it may be a little dry saying it like that, but that's how it is. And same kind of thing goes with your hands, right? Whether it be hands or oral, like those are ways you can sexually stimulate a partner without having to really get into it yourself if you don't want to. And also, as writers spoke about earlier, there's a lot of value in having that focus be on the one person and pleasing them and doing what they think feels good. Another thing I feel like happens a lot with oral is people feel like they need to go all the way or to completion with oral alone. And I feel like that's another tip to make oral a little more approachable is just use it as a starting point, especially if you're a girl and especially if you're, or not necessarily a girl. Let me rephrase that. Especially if you plan on going down on a guy and you're worried about, fitting things in your mouth or whatnot, you go earlier on, then things will be a little smaller before they're aroused. And so there's another little 1-2 punch there of the benefit of getting started that way and moving into it and using it almost as a pre there's a fancy name for that warm up that you do before sex. I can't remember.
No, I mean there's just sort of the foreplay, but yeah,
Foreplay, thank
sort
you.
of just sort of participating in it at all is probably good. Most of the time having different kinds of it's interesting to think of them as tricks or something, but it's a lot of people sort of build up a playbook of sex moves to be, better at sex. Because there's one thing about I was thinking about this a while back, but there's dancers that just get out on the dance floor and they're very passionate, but maybe they don't have any moves, right? They're like Elaine and Seinfeld, and just all thumbs,
Nice.
and so I imagine it's the same thing in the bedroom. And so there is something too about like if you have some dedicated practice behind it, maybe you can build up your playbook in the bedroom as well.
Yeah. So I got that link to that article, so I'll share that in the chat. And it's called "I Asked 3 Men Why They Didn't Go Down on Me, and I Think I Made the World a Better Place." And the author's name is Sarah Stroh, or Stroh Stroh. I might be messing that one up, but it basically is kind of like I was talking about. She had a guy that she was with who that was the guy she orgasmed the most with, and coincidentally he happened to go down on her all the time, and she's like, coincidence? I think not. And so then when she was dating other people in the future, she was like, hey, why don't you go down on me, or do you ever go down on people? And they had that conversation, and it changed both her life and the guys that she was talking to going forward from there. So Ryder, any last thoughts before we move on from the oral sex for today, before we
uh
finish?
yeah, you don't always have to complete read. It's okay. No, I'm kind of yeah. I don't think I have any extra thoughts on it. It's not something that I think about a whole lot. Nice when it happens. It's lovely, but yeah, it doesn't enter into the mental space very often.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think this will wrap it up for today on the oral sex talk. Now let's jump over to our second, somewhat related topic, which is things that we've changed our position on. When I said that, did anything immediately jump to mind?
Hmm. Yeah, probably. I think I'm thinking about it now. It went still in regards of sex and thinking about butt stuff
Yeah,
for girls and guys. Yeah, positions changed on that. Like I used to think it was super dirty. Now it's fun.
yeah. Well, that's the thing about that too, especially since you brought up the Christianity aspect. I mean, that's there's stuff written in the Bible about butt stuff that some people would argue, say, hey, you should never do it because of what it says in there, and some people say, oh, that's referencing other things. And frankly, I don't know enough on that to be able to weigh in, but I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, no, that is an interesting one to have your mind changed on. Was there something that uh, led the way, or some moment, or was it just like one day you're like, huh, why not?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, the interesting thing might just be that it has a different feeling, but it does feel good. And then over time, probably just gradually just sort of shifted positions on it. And just thinking differently about some of those kind of things. I also think in having friends that are gay, then you sort of go, oh, well, they can get pleasure from this. Why can't I get pleasure from this, right?
Yeah.
And then it goes the opposite direction too. If it's pleasurable for me, maybe it's pleasurable for my partner. That's a conversation to have.
Yeah. And when it comes to anal sex, I want to point out, like, yeah, get out there and do a little bit of research to see, like, hey, here's some things you can do to make it pleasurable instead of painful, and that what natural lubrication occurs and what lubrication you might want to do, and how to, especially for people who are new to it, how to do it in a way where you're not just going from 0 to 100 right away, and how you can use other things like hands or sex toys or things like that to get things warmed up and going and stuff like that for people who are listening and curious about that themselves. For me, when I'm thinking about something I've changed my position on, I don't know that I had anything that just like popped in my head and was like, oh yeah, that definitely that. But one thing that definitely I thought of was how, government's role in supporting people. When it comes to Republican versus Libertarian versus Democrat. I typically align myself as mostly a libertarian. And so because of that, I'd like to rely more on, say, nonprofits and third parties, in other words, non-government entities, to provide services and help for people in need. Whereas, for example, Democrats, they typically have the government performing that role. And Republicans, generally kind of similar to Libertarian as far as I'm aware, which is like relying on other third parties to kind of do that besides the government. And one of those areas where my mind has changed a little bit now that I've lived and seen some is healthcare. The one thing that I probably the most socialist on, if you will. I don't know that universal health care is the exact answer in America, especially considering how crazy the healthcare system is. The whole thing needs an overhaul. But especially as someone who has now lived in California and lived in Texas, and as I've talked about in previous episodes, like, I have to prove that I make enough money to get assistance in Texas for my health insurance. And yet, the whole thing about health insurance and healthcare is that the same idea we've talked about preventative maintenance many times on this show. If you're not doing that preventative maintenance, you're going to have some big not mistake, but big issue later on that's actually ended up costing more, having bigger impact. And oh, by the way, when you have those uninsured and underinsured people, who do you think pays for that? Guess what? Everybody else. And that's part of the whole system. So it's like, if you think you're getting off by not, because people aren't getting their things taken care of while they're small and cheap and easy to manage, they're blowing up into things like diabetes, which is a lifelong type of thing for some people that now they're going to have to be paying forever. And maybe you and or the government, or through your insurance, all these types of ways, that money is coming from somewhere. So that was one of the things that popped into my head.
Yeah, that's a big conversation to start sort of thinking about the mindsets behind these various things and which ones will actually you know provide things like dignity and value and access for people, and if they need it or if they have to work on it on their own, or if you're going to allow third parties to have altruistic networks in order to support other people. All those are kind of difficult. I think the two books that came to mind for me, one of them is very short. It's like 120 pages, something like that, is Our Malady by Timothy Snyder. And in that book, he talks about, well, he nearly dies because of issues with the medical and healthcare system. And he's a fantastic author who's kind of a historian and a little bit of a sociologist. So I would highly recommend his book because it sort of takes you through a walk of what happens in our own medical system, and then the failures of the medical system that actually lead to basically leading us towards a level of fascism or tyranny, because people cannot be, their health is so important to them that they won't speak up against anything because they need the job to maintain their health benefits. But our entire system is made not around preventative maintenance, but around these major activities. And people are so scared that they will not speak up. And so it silences people whenever your health is at stake. So it's a really interesting book to read. And like I said, it's not very long, and he's concise and poetic, and it's really good. The other one would be, for a lot of these issues, is Rutger Bregman's Utopia for Realists. And the reason I'd sort of recommend that one is he talks a lot about systemic problems that we have and how a lot of those could be solved with things like universal basic income or a universal health care, how these would prevent larger issues later. And you, of course, you can feel free to disagree with all of them. But as far as like going out to a fringe, like what would it look like if we had a, you know, a 20-hour work week or a 16-hour work week? What would it look like if we stacked UBI on top of that? What would it look like if we had free healthcare on top of that? What would it look like if we had open borders? And you stack all these things together, and what is the shape of the world that would happen if we did all these things? So anyway, something to kind of dig into, because there's a lot of sort of rich speculative thought in there, and it might reshape the way that you kind of consider these topics.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And for those at home, the first book he mentioned was Our Malady: Lessons in Liberty from a Hospital Diary by Timothy Snyder. We shared that link in the chat. And also Utopia for Realists: How We Can Build the Ideal World by Bregman. Rutger Bregman. And yeah, I'm interested in both of those. So I appreciate you sharing that. And for those who aren't familiar with Utopia, the idea of Utopia is designing a place where everything is perfect and it's an amazing world. And I'll let you change this definition if you need to, writer. But basically, Utopia is just you're designing this perfect place. And so I like how this book is called Utopia for Realists. It's like, all right, we get that Utopia is never really going to exist, but what would it look
Yeah.
like if we were going to be realistic about it?
Yeah, I mean, utopia. It does mean no place. The translation of it, and which is kind of fascinating, that has turned into this like heaven idea, like this ideal heaven on earth kind of notion, when it actually literally translates as no place.
That's
But
funny.
yeah, it's the books are good. It's worth kind of thinking about. If you could have a perfect world, what would that perfect world look like? I think that sometimes we get so bogged down in what we consider sort of realistic common sense that we forget to sort of dream about what would be amazing. And we just keep going, nope, that can't happen. And if we keep telling ourselves something can't happen, we'll never reach out and try to make it happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that talk in our head, that self-talk, that limits a whole bunch of things, from oral sex to anal sex to getting designing utopias, all sorts of things. It also popped into head. Danielle and I just finished the series Made on Netflix. Have you heard of that one?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So we actually liked it a lot. It's the idea is the main character is a woman who has a child, and she's struggling with whether or not she's going to stay with a guy, who the father, the baby daddy, and I'm going to be vague here because I don't want any spoilers, but and also as part of trying to figure out what her next step is and her independence and being able to support things, herself, her child, potentially her baby daddy. She has a job as a maid, and so it follows her of what what it really looks like for her to try and make ends meet. There's some things about getting government support and what that realistically looks like, and again, like we've referenced in the past, like when you make enough money but not too much money to get support, but not enough to realistically live. Same kind of
Yeah.
thing with her. She's like, all right, you have this issue, but does it meet one of these check boxes so we can give you help?
Yeah.
So some of that kind of concepts play out, and of course there's just good characters and things like that in there too. But she's also a writer, and she gives a writing prompt one day, which is, hey, what does your happiest day look like? And whether
Mm.
that is something that you've already, something popped into your mind and you have already experienced that day, or maybe it's something you want to picture and it hasn't happened yet. So I think that's a great journal exercise. Since we talked about Utopia, that popped in my head, so I wanted to make sure to bring that up. Well, writer, I think that's pretty much it for me on the topics that I've changed my position on, at least right now. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that conversation?
No, no, but these are fun topics. I think that we should sort of put a pin in the conversation now, but come back to them. I'm sort of interested in libertarian ideology and how it plays out, and I'm also interested in this kind of more socialist forms where the state takes care of people more and takes responsibility for them more rather than sort of letting individuals take care of themselves. I'm interested in all those things. I'd love to sort of dig deeper, and perhaps we can get a political expert on here to sort of walk us through some of those steps.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And sorry, I just noticed I was really sinking into your butt pit over here on this side of the couch. I was like, man, I just keep going lower and lower. But yeah, no, I find those things interesting as well. And also, I had one other point that I wanted to make, but it's gone now. So we'll just keep
Ah,
keep moving, and so we'll just go ahead and jump right into the recap for today. So today, with episode 69, we talked a little bit about oral sex, and we talked about the position itself in 69, and we talked about what some of the things that people think about and talk about, and maybe some things that people should be talking about. And that kind of, I think I'm going to make the challenge for today related to that, which is have a conversation about sex with your significant other. And if you don't have a significant other, one, maybe consider exploring yourself a little bit more and trying some things that you haven't tried before, or are looking into some things that you haven't looked into before, and maybe think about some things that you might want to try. And those could be by yourself. Those could also be potentially with a partner. And have that courage to have that conversation with a significant other, or even if it's just a one night stand, or whoever it might be. Like, don't be afraid to have that conversation. I mean, what's the worst that's going to come from that, right? So no sex that time, okay. It might be worth having a little bit of pain and lack of sex in the short term to make it better for the long term, so everyone can get more pleasure out of it. And we also highlighted how one of the nice things about oral is that unless you're doing it in the 69 position, it's focusing on a singular partner, a single person. And there's something really special to be said about that should not be discounted, especially for those who've been, say, married for a long time or together for a long time, and you've fallen into your normal routine. So grab a new item off the menu to try. But our challenge for today is to have that conversation and just have it openly and say, hey, would you be interested in trying to get a little bit better at sex, or improving our sex life, or having more satisfying sex? And as Ryder mentioned, if they say no to that, then maybe you need to have some other conversations and see why. Maybe
right.
they have a legitimate reason. Don't want to don't want to say that it's no reason that could make sense. But if they say yes, then there you go. You've opened the door and you can start talking about it. And make sure you come from a place of understanding, and make sure that you are probably part of the reason why things are the way they are. It's also perfectly possible that you have nothing to do with the way things are, and maybe someone had a past trauma, or a past misconception, or something someone told them, or something they've been telling themselves for a very long time. And just by having that conversation, you'll free that block up, and you'll say like, oh, I don't actually kind of like the folds of your belly, or I like the way that you have that funny mole on your butt, or whatever. Like, these things that you're self-conscious about, like, maybe your partner appreciates them, and maybe that's what makes you you. And maybe they don't appreciate them, and they're not amazing to them, but guess what, they're probably not going to change. So you can talk about them, let them know that you're self-conscious about these things, and then they can be like, oh, well, I didn't realize you're self-conscious about that. Like, if you'd rather turn the lights down, or maybe you get some lingerie that kind of covers that stuff up, but you still look hot in. Like, there are things you can do to work through those things you're insecure on. Well, with that, before we finish, Ryder, is there anything else you'd like to say or do?
No, I think that's good. Good recap.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for episode 69. Hopefully, you're just the right amount of uncomfortable. And the other challenge for today is go say some sex words aloud: penis, vagina, orgasm, blowjob, squirters, anal, tossing salads, the Philadelphia fake out. Don't look that one up at work. Uh, I, I think that's all I'm shaking out right now.
That's enough.
That's enough indeed. Well, with that, Everyone have a wonderful day, and go tell some people you talked about sex in 69 this morning, and have some conversations with some other people. It doesn't have to be just your partner. It could be a friend, a coworker when you're not sitting right next to your boss. All those types of things are perfectly good. With that, Ryder, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see y'all tomorrow morning.
All right. Bye bye.